from Paul's first letter to Timothy, first chapter, starting in verse 8. We know that the law is good if one uses it properly. We know also that law is made not for the righteous, but for lawbreakers and rebels, the ungodly and sinful, the unholy and the non-religious, for those who kill their fathers or mothers, for murderers, for adulterers and perverts, for slave traders and liars and perjurers, and for whatever else is contrary to the sound doctrine that conforms to the glorious gospel of the blessed God which he has entrusted. May God add his blessing to the reading out of Timothy here today. Let us pray. Almighty and loving God, I just ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart be acceptable to you, O Lord, my strength and my Redeemer. Amen. Amen. Paul is exasperating and difficult and brilliant. Paul is a man of courage and faith and strong will. And we've seen that over the several weeks we've been dealing with Paul, and it's no different today. But we're dealing with a sensitive subject, not that the others haven't been. They've been sensitive to different people, different thoughts. But today's is on homophobia. Was Paul homophobic? So let's define that. Homophobia, fear, hatred, discomfort with, mistrust of people who are lesbian, gay, or homosexual. Biphobia is fear, hatred, discomfort, or mistrust, specifically of people who are bisexual. And we hear a lot of talk of that in the church today, in our society today, really in the United States today. All maybe because of the June 26th ruling in 2015 by the Supreme Court, where the Supreme Court decided that the U.S. Constitution gives same-sex couples the right to legal marriage with all its qualities. Proponents call it marriage equality. Critics call it the end of Western civilization. But that decision didn't polarize the nation, because the nation was already polarized on the subject. Long before the 5-4 decision by the Supreme Court, people said it was a defeat for religious liberties. But again, we have culture and Christianity set against each other, and we think that's new. We like our views to be supported by Scripture. But on this particular subject, we have many scholars, brilliant men and women of the faith, who seem to be conflicted, vague, or call each other misinterpreted on their views. They cannot agree. So I'm not here today to say that this particular scholar has the answer, and I'm going to lay it out there for you, and you can walk out of church knowing that's exactly. One problem all scholars have: Jesus didn't comment on this issue. And so, because he doesn't comment on the issue, and yet he does comment on adultery, there is some difficulty. Because some believe silence is an implicit meaning that he approved of it. He didn't say anything against it, he must approve. Others say it was so bad, he didn't have to say anything about it. Again, confliction, vagueness, and there's no way we can interpret silence. So those that are for and those that are against interpret Jesus' silence the way they want it to be. Why did he denounce other sexual sins and not mention homosexuality? Well, we have views today on this subject, and they differ both in experience and mood from the first century. Paul speaks on this subject 3 times. He He speaks about it in Timothy, in 1 Corinthians, and then at some length in the first chapter of Romans. He mentions homosexual behavior in a context, not singularly by itself, but in a list of other sins, such as drunkenness, stealing, talking back to your parents, all listed together. Well, today homosexuality acceptance is seen by our society really as a whole as exciting because it's gaining acceptance by many, many people who at one point were dead set against it. So we have again this confrontation. Christian conviction versus contemporary culture. This time, Christian culture is starting to accept contemporary culture. We've had more open conversations about homosexuality, gay lifestyle, and same-sex marriage than ever before. And so because of that, in the last 3 years, more Christian conservatives have switched camps and have gone from opposing gay marriage to actually accept it. It has increased among Christian conservatives for the last 3 years. So where's Paul's view? Where's Paul on this subject? Well, for Paul, he falls somewhere in the middle that will make us feel uncomfortable for different reasons. So we have to really look at the context of sexuality in the first century. So we're going to go back a lot of time to see what the sexual mores were in first century Rome. And what we find is they were much different than in the 21st century West. For example, Roman ethics were much more permissive than we are today. And you know, we seem to think, oh my, things are getting out of hand. Be glad we didn't live in Rome. In Paul's world, Gentile men were expected to find both men and women sexually attractive. Expected. The Roman culture obsessed over virility. Roman men were considered manly when they had sex with males, females, and as awful and as deplorable and as ugly, even children. That's the first century. There were no immoral overtones in Roman culture. Hear this. Not only were homosexual relations considered entirely appropriate, it was not considered adultery. So if you're married, you could have a homosexual relationship and it was not considered adultery in first century Roman culture. There was no talks of sexual orientation. They didn't use words like gay, straight, or heterosexual. A Roman man was supposed to desire sex with men or women as long as he was in the dominant role. That's where it was accepted. And I'm not going to go in any deeper than that because it gets a little delicate. There are specific ways you can tell who's in charge. But what we can say accurately is today, homosexual behavior does not pose an unprecedented challenge to Christianity. We've been facing it for a long, long, long time. And Paul was converting homosexuals just as he was heterosexuals. He didn't even decide. He thought their behavior was not good. But he was converting them the same way. So, we must understand that preaching the gospel to all people is important. Understanding that everyone's views on these delicate issues do not change overnight. So, if that person is converted, he doesn't automatically, or she doesn't automatically change their view on that particular subject. Conversion doesn't mean an instantaneous change to some of your views. It does mean an instantaneous acceptance as being saved by Jesus Christ because of the cross. Paul had converts of all types of behaviors in his churches. And we must remember, most Romans had homosexual experience by the time Paul was speaking. So what did Paul think about homosexual behavior? Where does he come down? He talks about it, he mentions it in short, like he does here in 1 Timothy, again in 1 Corinthians. But what everybody seems to talk about is what he talks about in Romans 1. Paul argues, quote, God's invisible qualities, his eternal power and divine nature are so evident in creation that everyone stands without excuse for their ignorance. Gentiles, the Romans, ignored the revelation of God in nature and traded it in. The glory of God, the Creator, to worship things was traded in for their own selfish needs of sexual behavior. So the list is, or the consequence is, shameful lust. Even women exchanged natural sexual relations for unnatural ones. Men abandoned natural relations for shameful acts with other men. Acts that are lustful and sexual. Let's be clear. Paul did not witness, and he's not speaking of, monogamous romantic acts of love. He's speaking of the acts that were permitted in Roman culture, which are physical lust, hideous, shameful, and sick sexual behavior. That's what the Bible is commenting. We don't want to confuse the two. Meaning even heterosexual acts that were shameful and hideous and sick is what Paul was talking about. Not just homosexual acts, but even heterosexual acts. So when we participate, when people participate in shameful acts with either sex, it is idolatry. And we're putting our selfish actions ahead of what God intended. Most of the time, it seems to play out in our society in sexual relations because of our sexual appetites and misplaced passions. But it's not the only misplaced passion. Envy, murder, strife, deceit, malice on the same line with these shameful sexual acts. We may not consider them the same, but God does. We could even include on the same line gossipers, slanderers, God-haters, people who are insolent, arrogant, boastful. We wouldn't include them on the same line. But I believe God does. How about people that disobey their parents? How about the list of human inclinations that deviate from God's will? All on the same line. So the question, when I look in the mirror, am I on the list? Paul continued the Old Testament view on homosexuality, that is, that it was sinful because it violates law, but he never said the law is out of date because of Christ coming. He doesn't say that law has changed, never said it. But again, Paul's not talking about monogamous romantic love between two people. He's talking about lustful, shameful, sexual acts. Even though Paul endorses the Old Testament view on homosexuality, he never endorses the penalty that the Old Testament poses for that act. And in Leviticus, the penalty is to have homosexuals cut off from the rest of the people and even put to death. But Paul never says that. He never endorses them. And he had plenty of opportunities. He wrote half of the New Testament. So with Paul's view on this controversial subject, He was telling the Romans who were engaged in this practice openly that they were wrong, but still, he embraced them to convert them. What Paul said is when you convert to Christianity, you are no longer allowed to openly participate in shameful acts of a sexual nature with either a man or a woman. Not just the same sex, but heterosexuals that were converted, that were doing shameful sexual acts, were also supposed to stop. So Paul has a more sexually restrictive ethic than his Roman converts would have ever imagined. So what about our view today, 2019, in the American Christian church? Where are our sexual restrictions? In the church. Born-again, believing Christians today live together as heterosexuals in alarming numbers. Born-again, professing, active, church people living together. And it's not even an issue. It's not an issue in our culture, and it's not even an issue in the church. Pastors, including this one, counsel people who are living together in every age group. It's not just young people, folks. All ages are doing this. And we excuse it. Well, it's economically more sound. It's financially better for us. Same thing people did years ago. Remember in our day, back in the 60s, what was it called? Shack it up. You know, Bertman. You know, Betty and Bill over there are shacking up. Oh, no, not Betty's getting it. Yeah, they're shacking up. Now, parents are almost saying, well, Walker, when are you and Julie going to move in together? It would be a lot cheaper for you. Church people. Church people. I know a church that said they would not marry a couple that was living together. Church 20 years, no marriage. It's okay, we'll get married. So by drawing the line in the sand, people stop coming. What are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to act? We're supposed to extend forgiveness and fellowship to all these people, homosexuals, heterosexuals, but not condone sexual misconduct, heterosexually or homosexually. But remember, when we get on somebody for their immoral sexual acts, remember, arrogance, slander, gossip, when you're getting on people, when you're talking negative about people, when you're giving your opinion about, oh my, that's so terrible. Did you hear about it? You did. Because all of those things are equally as damaging to the Christian community. Do we do that? We would not ever want to lump homosexuals in with murderers or gossipers. But they're all on the same. How'd that make us feel? Ever gossip? Well, while I'm on this Pauline roll here, let's just keep going. If the family is made to represent Christ's love for the church, how do we explain the divorce rate among believers? Now, we know the divorce rate is 50%, maybe a little more than that, among people. It's around 25% for active, professing believers in Jesus Christ. 1 in 4 believers in Jesus Christ get divorced. We're told not to exasperate our children, but children rebel. Why? Because we exasperate them. We don't communicate with them, we exasperate them. So the takeaway is Paul counseled sexual misconduct abusers in the same way he counseled slanderers, thieves, and adulterers. Well, Pastor, how did he do that? Romans 12, 1 and 2. Do not conform to the standards of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and prove what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect. Are you willing not? Are you willing to not conform? It's hard to navigate this terrain that runs between the culture of the day, Paul's teaching, our own faith, society's perception of justice and fairness, the New World Order that challenges the old religion, the old world order, the old system of righteousness. And guess what? This was true in Paul's first century, just as it's true in our 21st century. So some might say, where are we? Some would view Paul to be on the wrong side of history, on this issue as long and on others. But we can decide for ourselves on this issue. But bigger than Paul's view today is our own view. What is our view? We know that Paul spoke about women in many ways that seem regressive compared to today, maybe even appalling to what some of you heard from past sermons. But further reading about Paul shows that some of his first century principles led to eventual liberation for women and slaves. So the question would be, is Paul's view on homosexuality going to be liberating for the church in the centuries to come? Is our view going to be liberating, restrictive, right, wrong, good, bad? What is it going to be? Does the trajectory towards greater liberty apply to same-sex marriage, the acceptance of openly gay members, the living together before marriage? Is that going to just gain acceptance and it's a new sexual moray of the day that the church is just going to enjoy? So I think it's a fair question to ask. William Webb is a fellow that was a professor at Dallas Theological Seminary. Now he's an adjunct professor at different schools. He teaches biblical study. He compares the kingdom of God and the study of our working in it like dough. At first you can't see the yeast working, and it doesn't seem to be accomplishing anything. Eventually, the effect of yeast is amazing. The dough rises 2 or 3 times its original size. He says, the Bible establishes a principle, this is quote, establishes a principle that initially has little effect, but over time produces extraordinary change. Warning, you cannot apply this just to the principles you like or agree with your view. And that's where we come down a lot of times. If it's good for me, I'm for it. If it hits a little too close to home, I don't say it. Or, let's finish up. There's been a lot of lengthy debates, questions, conversations on homophobia and homosexuality. If we define homosexuality as sexual relations between 2 same-sex couples, the Bible retains that it's prohibited. From the words in the Torah, it's prohibited. Are we going to use the Torah as our guiding factor on that particular subject? And are we allowed to do that without using the other laws in the Torah? Can we just pull out the ones that I'm okay with and not use the ones that Webb? Because if we decide, yes, it's prohibited in the Torah, that's what I believe, then all of you that are wearing garments that have 2 different materials are breaking the same law. Anybody have on something that's 2 different materials today? Anybody ever eat any fat? Prohibited. Letting your hair become unkept. Thank you very much. I think that was very nice. Drinking alcohol in holy places. Eating an animal which doesn't both chew cud and have a divided hoof. I'm in trouble. I love rabbit and pig. Trouble. Can't eat. Also can't eat camel. I've never had any camel. Never smoked a camel. But if you like rabbit and pig, stop. Can't do it. Have any of you ladies brought a boy to church before 33 days? Because you're not allowed to bring a baby to church if it's a boy 33 days after you birth. Girl, 66 days. Anybody bring their child to church and been baptized in the first 66 days? Don't do it again. Tell your kids not to do that. It's against the Torah. Spreading slander. Can't do it. Seeking revenge or bearing a grudge. Come on. Anybody ever bear a grudge? Woo! No, you know, we've had a few of those. Trimming your beard and cutting your hair at the sides. Let's grow a beard, Dave. No, you can't do it. It's against the Torah law. You gotta keep your hair growing. Getting tattoos. Here's one for today. Mistreating foreigners. Can't do that. Torah says you can't. Cursing your mother and father. Working on the Sabbath. Profane talk about God or speaking sacrilegiously. Any golfers in here? That was a joke. I'm not indicting all the golfers. Tennis players, bowlers, everything. Selling land permanently. So can we really decide among ourselves which laws of the Torah we can keep and which laws we can't? But you'll hear that argument. We've culturally done that. We've yielded to the things that work best for us. We work on the Sabbath. We cause others to work on the Sabbath, and we don't think anything about it. I go out to eat on Sunday, almost every Sunday, and I cause those girls in Skyline to work. And I don't think twice about it. Is there a day that I take off and don't cause anybody else to work and have my Sabbath rest? I'm going to preach it myself. Because we've looked at new ways of acting on the Sabbath. Oh, well, I go there because they need to make money and be employed. See what a great thing I'm doing. You think God's pleased with that? Here's where we may be today. Is same-sex marriage okay? We have different views. They differ greatly in our society. And I will tell you, we have different views right in these 29. So we look at the Bible. We look at Paul. We have to look at the entirety of Scripture. All the laws. Not only the laws that we think others are breaking, but that we're breaking as well. Would Paul and God, by extension, approve of a loving, consensual, same-sex relationship between equals? Because there's no example of loving, consensual, same-sex equals in the Bible. Paul would not have been able to comprehend this. It never happened in the first century. Roman mores, sexual mores of the day would have made it nearly impossible for a gay relationship to be among equals. It was always among somebody of higher status and a slave status. It was never equals. It was impossible. So would Paul have been, how would he have felt about this? I know he would have encouraged gay people, that he wouldn't have called gay, to convert, to become believers, to become followers of Jesus Christ. And he would have said, stay single. Because really, even toward heterosexuals, stay single. I mean, if you really get this burning love, passion for one another, get married. But if you can, and you can, stay single. But he would never think a same-sex couple would marry. It just wouldn't have been between equals. I wonder what it'd be like to study. I wonder what it'd be like to have Paul here in the 21st century talking about this subject. I mean, we can't. He may think that homosexuality is inappropriate. He may just hold on to where he was. Many think that if he would have experienced a monogamous, loving, same-sex, socially acceptable relationship where it wasn't between higher status and slave, those that are on the side of it would say he would probably accept it as he did heterosexual. We don't know. Maybe he would have been offended, disappointed, maybe have been upset. But I'll bet he would have accepted them all into the faith. No matter whether you read it. So it seems, whether we're in Paul's first century or our 21st century, we find ourselves in the same place. Paul urged the people today, and I would urge you on this subject to take the side of grace. We are to love everybody, no matter our view on something. As believing, Christ-following people who sin beyond what God would want us to sin. Maybe we should love each other and submit to each other out of grace. Because I am no better. Paul's goal wasn't to compromise or meet in the middle or make everybody happy. He said we are to meet at the cross and be transformed and converted into the fellowship. So as we conform to Christ, we become members of one large family. We've talked about that in Silver Abbey since the beginning. This is your family, and you are to love your family. We all don't agree. I just spent 2 days with my kids, and guess what? They don't agree. And they really don't agree with the old man. But we all love each other. And we got each other's back. Because all of us, even my kids, my crazy kids, are created in the image of God. And we should be patient with one another as we all strive to not conform to the dirt of the world. So maybe the bottom line is the foundation of the Christian community is not perfection or even consensus. The bottom line is Christ. That's our focus. In our conversations on this particular subject and all the others, it should be Christ. We don't all have to agree eye to eye on individual subjects, but we all agree eye to eye on the transforming power and the grace-filled life that Christ gives us when He saves our life. So if we are Christ-centered, if we're a Christ-centered community, if we're a Christ-centered church, then we have love for our family. Whether they are gay, whether they're straight, we love them because they're part of the family. Scandal of our gospel is not based on who it excludes, but who it includes. That's what we need the scandal to be. But I'm afraid that for many people, the scandal of the church is how we exclude. But the scandal should be like it was in the first century. Look how they love. What is it up with those Jesus followers? How they love. Because no matter your sexual orientation, whether you believe in same-sex marriage or not, Jesus accepts us all individually. So we may be sitting here in the middle between culture and the modern Pharisees, a place where Paul often found himself, because we know Jesus accepts gays, He accepts gossips, He accepts Pastor Chuck. Y'all got it now. He doesn't have to approve of a behavior to accept it. He willingly forgives me of my sins. And on top of that, He even gives the Holy Spirit to live inside. Maybe we should think on all of that before we proclaim judgment against a particular act or person or neighbor or family. Amen. Almighty loving God, we thank You that the church will speak on sensitive subjects. We thank You that our family is willing to talk about it. Not agree or disagree or right or wrong, but to know that we need Your help to understand it in our day, in our context, among this family. Lord, help us to extend the kind of grace that we want to receive. And as long as we are extending the kind of grace we want to receive, we will love our family and love our family in the way that You taught us maybe even a glimpse into how you love us. In Jesus' name we pray. Our final hymn is number 5.